Good morning. Welcome to King's Report News Hour for the 16th year of Chungi, the seventh month and the fourth day now with the heavenly calendar. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Chungi. Hey, it's July 4th. Well, no, we don't say July. If you start mixing up, a lot of people do that. They refer to the months in the lunar calendar by the names of the Gregorian calendar months, or also, I guess, Julian calendar also uses the same names. But that gets confusing, right? Because, for example, we saw that last month, right? The leap sixth month had what, 29 days? 29 days. So, uh, and I've told you, I think it's been a long time ago, I told you once about how I got this question one time about the schedule surrounding God's Day. And this was back when, well, I don't know, no, I guess it was after we started celebrating God's Day on the heavenly calendar. But a person was confused because the schedule said that there would be December 29th and the next day would be January 1st. And they said, hey, what happened? There's something wrong with this schedule. You're missing 2 days. No, 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 just that you're mixing up names of the month. So that's why I always say seventh month, not July. That makes it clear that we're not talking about the solar calendar. All right, so anyway, Camille is sitting in for the second king of Chandragupta, Young Jimun, and let's make our round around the kingdom as we usually do right now. In Chongpyeong, Tennessee, it is mostly clear and 55, so a nice morning it seems. And then today getting up to 74, nice with times of clouds and sun. So it's officially nice, guys. Tonight clear and cool, a low of 49. Whoa, okay, getting into the 40s. And in father's hometown in Cheongju, North Pyongan province, in what is now North Korea, currently 75 degrees and mostly clear, getting down to 64 tonight with increasing clouds. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy and humid, high of 81. And at the Tongagung Palace in northeast Pennsylvania, we have 54 degrees right now, sunny skies. And then pleasant with sunshine mixing with some clouds today, high of 75. Okay, that's nice there too. Partly cloudy tonight, low of 50 degrees. Then at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, currently partly cloudy and 71 to start the day, getting up to 95, sunny to partly cloudy. Low tonight, 72, a thunderstorm in spots this evening, otherwise partly cloudy. At the Suncheon Palace in Korea, currently 82 and some clouds. Low tonight, 72, mostly cloudy and uncomfortably humid. Tomorrow, hot, humid intervals of clouds and sunshine. High of 92. Okay. At the Gumna Palaces in Japan, currently 91, even though it's evening, it's already after 8 o'clock, but still the temperature is 91 outside. And let's see, it's partly cloudy, but it looks like rain is starting here in just a minute or so. And tonight, getting down to 75, mainly clear and uncomfortably humid. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy and hot. A little afternoon rain, high of 99 at the Gunma Palaces. And at the Ilan property in Taiwan, currently 87 and currently 87 and getting down to 75 tonight, partly to mostly cloudy with a passing shower. Tomorrow, a thunderstorm in spots in the morning, otherwise some sun, then turning cloudy, high of 93. All right. And let's see, today I can actually give you some words from Father, and I'm taking it from this book. All right, can you get it? Can I get it in the camera? There you go. From World Scripture 2. And this is the book that the king is using right now in the morning Hundokhe. And so I'm turning today to chapter 16. Chapter 16 here in the World Scripture, Volume 2. And actually, I think for all intents and purposes, we don't use Volume 1 because my memory is that Volume 1, or actually, it was not called Volume 1, it was called The World Scripture. There was no Volume 1 attached to it. But then And Father accepted it. He accepted it, but then later on, he said, "You know what? Not enough of Father's words in Volume One." And so a new world scripture was created with Father's authority and under Father's instruction. And so this is called World Scripture Volume Two, and this is really the only one that we use. So anyway, Volume Two of the World Scripture, Chapter 16 is titled Prayer and Worship. 기도와 예배, prayer and worship. And here, Father speaking on August 9th, 1959. We don't have too many quotes from Father previous to 1960, and this is one of them. 도의 길을 찾기 위하여 산중 수도하는 것도 다 일리가 있습니다. So, Father saying that there is an argument, there is an argument for engaging in monastic practices in the mountains, for the purpose of seeking the path of To. To, of course, is the spiritual path, right? To. Tao. I think in Chinese, I believe it's Tao. Taoism, for example, that Tao. But Father's referring to it not in the sense of Taoism, but just in a broader sense of a path, right? In English, also, we use the phrase path seekers, people who are seeking a spiritual path. So he says there's an argument for that. 그러므로 우리는 내적 각오 밑에 거기에 대비되는 외적인 각오, 항상 조건을 구비해 놓고 어떤 것에 부딪혀도 나간다는 자신, 맨 밑장에 떨어져도 심신을 지탱할 수 있는 자신을 가져야 됩니다. Okay, so therefore, 그러므로 we need an external determination that underlies an internal determination, and confidence that no matter what may happen, no matter what obstacles we may come up against, we will continue to follow the path. And even if we should go to the lowest point, we should fall down to the lowest point. We need to have the confidence that even in that situation, we'll be able to support our mind and body. 심신을 지탱할 수 있는. 그렇지 않고는 달릴 수도 없고 경주 마당에 나설 수도 없습니다. So without that kind of confidence, we cannot 달릴 수도 없고, literally means run, but I think he means here, we cannot enter the race, I think is really what he means here. And we cannot even enter the stadium, he says. That's why I think it means 달릴 수도 없고 means that we cannot even enter the race, because in the last part of the sentence he says, 경주 마당에 나설 수도 없습니다. Can't even enter the stadium where the race is taking place if we don't have that kind of confidence. So Father is speaking here, August 9th, 1959, Volume 7, page 135, Volume 7 of the speeches of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, and page 135. Okay, praise God for that word that he has given us this morning. All right, let's see what's going on. And as I mentioned yesterday, the South Korean president, of course, I met President Trump, and I said that probably the best thing for Lee Jae-myung would be that if he could get out of there without much news. And well, he did manage to survive it, and it's customary for South Korean presidents to visit the United States once they enter office. The unusual thing about Lee Jae-myung was that he went to Japan before going to the United States, and that sort of emphasized the importance, I guess, that he places on the relationship with Japan. But also he wanted to get some advice from Ishiba, the Prime Minister of Japan on how to handle the situation with President Trump. And I think foreign leaders are finding out that President Trump there's very little pomp and ceremony with him. Everything is very serious, and everything can, well, as Zelensky found out, things can go south very quickly if you're not careful. Anyway, Izumo managed to go in and get out without any damage, and uh, right now South Korea has promised a whole bunch of kind of economic aid. I mean, I'm sorry to have to say this, but recently it seems that the United States is accepting economic aid from other countries. That's what it seems like. Ships, planes, billions in investment pledges. South Korea's lead charms Trump with deals. The U.S. and South Korea announced a series of agreements on Monday in Washington, including multi-billion-dollar investments, record $50 billion aviation purchases by Korean Air, and new energy cooperation that leaders from both countries met in the Oval Office. It includes a $150 billion pledge from South Korean companies on an order of 103 planes from Boeing, purchases of South Korean ships, and a shipbuilding partnership. We really sort of need each other. We love what they do. We love their products. We love their ships. We have a lot of things that they make, and they love what we have. President Donald Trump said it during his press conference with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung. The announcements followed a July trade deal that lowered U.S. tariffs on South Korean exports, including autos, to 15% from 25%. As part of the deal, Seoul committed $350 billion in investments in the U.S., with $150 billion earmarked for shipping cooperation. It was not immediately clear if Monday's pledges overlapped with the earlier figure, although Reuters reported that the $150 billion pledge was separate from the $350 billion that the July deal encompassed. Lee said in his remarks that I believe that there is a renaissance taking place, not only in shipbuilding sector, but also in the manufacturing industry. And I hope that Korea can be a part of that renaissance. Separately, Korean Air announced an almost $50 billion deal to buy aircraft and engines from U.S. manufacturers. Okay. So what is this? This is Boeing. Okay. Well, so that happened, and then, but the interesting thing that I guess caught everyone's attention is that, let me see here. Okay, yeah. Trump mentioned before the meeting that he was concerned about investigations targeting Korean churches. And this is a Reuters article. The interesting thing about this Reuters article is that it does not mention the Unification Church or Family Federation. Instead, it mentions Sarang Cheil-Kyohae, which is interesting. In Korea right now, I would say the Unification Church or the Family Federation is bigger news. It's more widely covered by the media, but perhaps Reuters has a reason for ignoring that one but just simply covering the other one. Anyway, let's look at this. This is Reuters. Trump said on Monday he was seeking information from South Korea about investigations in that country that he said targeted churches and a military base. Police probably shouldn't have done that, but I heard bad things. I don't know if it's true or not. Trump told reporters just before he was due to meet Lee Jae-myung at the White House. I'll be finding out. And then oops. And Trump said he had heard there were raids on churches over the last few days, and churches plural, very vicious raids on churches by the new government in South Korea, and added that they even went into our military base and got information. And that's a situation where, yeah, I think it explains here. Earlier this month, Seoul police raided. I'm not sharing this with you now. earlier this month, Seoul police raided Sarangche Church headed by evangelical pastor Chung Kwang-hun, is it? Or I thought it was Chung. Anyway, who led protests in support of ousted South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, Yonhap News Agency said. So yeah, Pastor, I thought it was Chung, not Chung, but anyway, um, he has been leading. He was leading a protest in the center of Seoul for many days, and he fasted, and he was in the news a lot at that time. And um, it's not clear why the police raided that particular church, because I don't think they're involved in any particular scandal with regards to Yoon. But I think anyway, it says that the police were investigating pro-Yoon activists who stormed a court in late January after it extended the detention of Yoon. In July, special prosecutors investigating Yoon's declaration of martial law served a search warrant on the Korean part of a military base jointly operated with the United States. South Korean media said the search was conducted with the permission of the South Korean military, but without coordination with U.S. authorities. Earlier on Monday, Trump posted on his Truth Social forum, "What is going on in South Korea? It seems like a purge or revolution. We can't have that and do business there. I'm seeing the new president today at the White House. Thank you for your attention to this matter." So when he says thank you for your attention, I think he was referring to the South Korean president, sort of telling him, I'm going to ask you about this, so prepare an answer for me. And well, yeah, with the military base thing, I think, yeah, the South Koreans did sort of handle that quite poorly. They should have gotten permission from the Americans as well as their own military before going in there with a search warrant. The Americans are concerned that, these civilians, South Korean civilians, I mean, they're non-military. They're civilians in the sense they're non-military. They don't have, you know, they don't have clearance, and they're going through and they're seeing all kinds of facilities from the outside, sure, buildings, but they're seeing these things. And so there was some concern about the security of the U.S. Facilities on that base. Probably if they had, coordinated with the U.S. military beforehand, they could have worked out something, but they didn't, or they failed to. They didn't think it was necessary, I guess. And the U.S. military, I know, was quite angry about that. So that's what that was referring to. Now, in terms of the churches, and also this other thing, the conclusion of this was that after the meeting, President Trump said, "Okay, it was all a misunderstanding." And his use of that term is very interesting to me because if anyone who's lived in South Korea for any length of time will have come across this word misunderstanding a lot because this is the default expression for papering over disagreements. Okay. You have a fight, and each side is arguing and, raising your voices and stuff like that. And then eventually the way you sort of de-escalate is to say, okay, it was all a misunderstanding. Okay. Now, the disagreement is still simmering below the surface, all right. but you agreed to call it a misunderstanding. You don't agree to disagree. You agreed to agree that this was a misunderstanding. And I can't even count the number of times that I've heard that term used in my presence. I, because I have a lot of arguments, I guess. But then also when the other side proposes that it's all a misunderstanding, I'm expected to go along with that. Okay, I'm expected to go along with that. I want to say no, it's not a misunderstanding. I mean, you done me wrong. All right, you rascal. You done me wrong. But once they say it's a misunderstanding, then I'm sort of pushed into a corner. I have to agree, and I have to back down also. It's crazy. It's crazy living here. So President Trump said it was a misunderstanding. And I wonder if that was proposed. If it was Lee Jae-myung was the first to use that word. Uh, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. In that case, you know, um, I hope President Trump realizes that the word is only intended to paper over an existing disagreement. It does not mean that the disagreement has been resolved. It simply means that we're not going to talk about it. Okay, we're not going to fight about it. That's all it means. So President Trump said it was a misunderstanding. Okay. Oh my goodness. Um, so let's see here. Well, yeah, also, President Trump said that he wanted to meet Kim Jong-un, and Lee Jae-myung made an interesting comment proposing that Trump perhaps could meet Kim Jong-un later this year. And this is what? Who is this? Who's writing this? Let me see who's writing this. Reuters. Okay. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has proposed a possible meeting between President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un later this year if Trump comes to South Korea for a regional forum meeting, Lee's office said. That's interesting because this is referring to the APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, and or Economic Council, I guess it is. And uh, this implies that Lee Jae-myung is going to invite Kim Jong-un to attend that meeting, to come to South Korea to attend that meeting. It's going to be held in Gyeongju. If you've been to South Korea, you know where that is. It's in the sort of the southeast part of the country. And I don't know, recently the sort of vibe coming out of North Korea is that they're not interested in any sort of rapprochement or with South Korea or with the United States for that matter. Um, and they're just going to, they're just going to be the tough guy, right? Don't start a fight with me because if you do, you're going to be sorry. This kind of a thing, sort of a gangster type attitude that North Korea has recently. Some people are saying that Kim Jong Un himself is just a sort of a figurehead, and that the actual um, brain, shall we say, or the actual running of the country is being done by maybe a group of people, but maybe Kim Yo Jong, the younger sister, is the sort of the main figure in that actual managing group. That Kim Jong Un just sort of partying and going around with his daughter. Lee and Trump had a pleasant meeting where the two leaders exchanged praises and talked about assassination attempts against them. Kim Yoo Jong, the spokesperson, said the two did not discuss Washington's demand over Seoul's opening to agricultural products. Kang added, right? So yes, I think Lee Jae-myung, that was one of his objectives, was to get through this meeting without having to talk about opening the market to agricultural products. So APEC meeting in October. Will Trump attend? Will Kim Jong Un attend? It's possible that Trump could attend, but the possibility that Kim Jong Un will attend, I think, is very, very remote. Of course, anything can happen, and North Korea is the kind of country where they can make a decision in the spirit of the moment, but it would be quite inconsistent with the vibe that we've been getting from North Korea recently. I think last time, Kim Jong Un wanted to meet Trump because it elevated his position within the country. It also elevated his position within the world. But you saw look at this photograph. Well, I already killed it. Okay, but the photograph with Trump and Kim Jong Un that was taken during that meeting during Trump's first term. It was a father and son photograph, right? Oh, okay. Trump really overpowered Kim Jong Un. And I'm pretty sure the North Koreans do not want that to be repeated. So I think it's highly doubtful that they're going to meet. And if they do, they will not take a picture standing up, only sitting down. I think only sitting down. All right, all right. Let's see what's going on. What else is going on here? Oh yeah, President Trump is attempting to fire a member of the Federal Reserve Board but she's saying, no, you don't have the authority. I'm going to continue my work. So we'll see how that develops. That's interesting. But the issue of the independence of the Fed is one that investors, world investors, pay attention to. And if they get the impression that the independence of the Fed is being undermined, then that may have an effect uh, on the demand for U.S. debt and also demand for U.S. dollars as well. So that could actually work against what President Trump is trying to do. Let's see what happens. This thing with the government taking a um, share in Intel. Now, Breitbart has a story on how this is not socialism. I saw the headline, and I want to go into that because I don't see how it's not socialism. Let's take a look at that. Trump's Intel investment isn't socialism. Now, to give you a little bit of background, so Trump is saying that listen, we've been giving money to all these companies, right? And what are we getting in return? And he's a businessman. If you give something to someone, you got to get something in return. That's how businessmen think. So Trump is saying, listen, if we're giving them money, we should get some stock in the company. And he's saying, okay, but we're not going to participate in the management of the company. Okay. Yeah, but this sounds to me like the kind of thing where the government gets its foot in the door, and then later on, just like the income tax, right? 1% of income on just the top 1% of income earners. But today, of course, everybody, almost, well, at least half, I guess, of Americans pay income tax. So I am concerned about this. And I think maybe 50 years from now, we may look back and see that this was not a wise thing to do. Anyway, let's take a look at this. Why this is not socialism. The White House's sudden decision to take a 10% stake in Intel startled some observers as a surprising lurch to government overreach by a Republican administration. Yes, okay, I'm one of those who's surprised. In truth, it looks less like a lurch and more like a pilot program for an idea economic nationalists have been refining for years. Julius Krein, editor of American Affairs, has been arguing that America's capital markets are structurally incapable of funding the industries the nation actually needs. Last week's deal gave him a live fire case study. For decades, U.S. corporate strategy has been to maximize shareholder value, not profits, Krein has argued. The two overlap only sometimes. Okay, I'm not sure I understand that. That's why companies cling to hurdle rates of 15%, even when the true cost of capital is half that. A project that could return a solid 7 or 8% will be passed over because it drags down return on assets ratios and puts the multiples at risk. The result is chronic underinvestment in precisely the sectors that matter most: capital-intensive industries like chips, energy hardware, aerospace, and defense. Wall Street prefers asset-light software firms where margins are fat and capital commitments are small. Nikeification, separating design rents from a messy work of production, became the model. America congratulated itself on tech dominance even as it outsourced the industrial backbone to Asia. The outcome is visible in the semiconductor market. Intel hollowed out Taiwan's TSMC and Command. Conventional subsidies barely scratch the surface because the market structure itself tells executives not to invest no matter how much Congress appropriates. Krein's answer is not just more grants, but a new institution, a U.S. sovereign wealth fund or development bank modeled on the IFCUS legislation Vice President Vance once championed. Instead of writing checks that vanish, such a vehicle would take loans, guarantees, or equity stakes in critical industries recycle returns, and permanently crowd in private capital. The logic is straightforward. A $50 billion appropriation, leveraged, could mobilize hundreds of billions. Unlike when one-off grants, a portfolio fund adapts, experiments, and reinvests. It fills the scale-up gap where America excels at R&D only to watch commercialization flee overseas for lack of financing. Okay, well, I'm beginning to get the picture, but um, uh, I'm thinking of what Japan used to have. They don't have this anymore, but they had something called the Ministry of MITI, MITI. Well, what did that stand for? Ministry of, I guess it was International Trade and Industry. Anyway, this was a government ministry that basically guided, or was, well, some businessmen disagree, but the intention was to guide the development of Japanese industry. And um, supporters of MITI say that it played a crucial role in Japan's industrial development during the 60s and 70s, and perhaps even some into the 80s. I'm pretty sure it does not exist anymore. They got rid of it, partly because private sector said we're tired of being told what to do. But if the government wants to guide the industrial development, which is what this seems to be saying, then rather than investing in the companies, rather than taking the equity share in companies, maybe something like a MITI would be more sensible, because they say that they're not, even though they're taking an equity share, they're not going to participate in the management of the company. So if you're not going to participate in if you're not going to participate in the management of the company, what's the point? Right? They say, well, actually, this article is a little bit different from another article that I read, which said that the Treasury Department, which is holding the shares, will always vote um, with the corporate leadership, with the board, and they're not going to have a seat on the board. Just they're going to vote with the board. So I don't understand how this is going to influence the direction of investment. Um, I guess we'll see how it works out. I guess President Trump obviously knows a lot more about business than I do, and so perhaps he has some sort of a strategy in mind. I guess, but I don't know. So, is this socialism? I guess that's one thing that concerns me, and perhaps some of you as well. Let me make sure I'm not going to lose power here. Just here. Here, okay. Mm, yeah. Okay. I still have a lot of power, but just in case. Yeah, so at 53%. Okay. And we'll see how it works out. But I think, 50 years from now, maybe we're going to become like Sweden was. Sweden has actually been decreasing its the government investment in industries. At one point, I think they were up to 90% in some industries, but they're decreasing it now. So, are we going to sort of Swedenize ourselves? Quite possible, I think, quite possible. And in a world where we're living with China, competing with China, perhaps this is necessary. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Perhaps this is necessary. I don't know. But yeah, I'm skeptical about this, especially when they say, okay, we're going to do this with other industries as well. Well, I don't know. But this, Breitbart seems to say that this is not socialism. Um, So here, okay, they're talking about the risks. All right, let's look at the risks. There are risks, but it isn't socialism. Okay, this doesn't make an Intel stake flawless. A bespoke personality-driven negotiation is a poor substitute for a rules-based fund with a clear mandate. Left in Trump's hands alone, it can mutate into deal capitalism, leaning on Apple to use Intel fabs before they're competitive, to appointing CEOs in the Oval Office, distorting rather than strengthening the sector in the hands of. Let's get rid of this ad on the right hand side here. I think I can do it simply in here. Okay. Distorting rather than strengthening the sector in the hands of a left-wing president, the equity stake could be used to pressure a company into sacrificing production to lower carbon emissions or chase a DEI quota. Yeah, I mean, okay, yes. Thank you for making my point. But it is worth noting this was already a risk with the pre-existing system of grants, loans, and tax breaks. That's, of course, true too. Government funding always comes with strings, and the Biden administration was not shy about using its industrial policy to advance climate and diversity goals. There's no reason why a non-voting equity stake should lead to more interference than a loan or grant. Okay. In fact, because the equity stake is permanent capital, it could mean less leverage over a day-to-day business than a grant tied to annual reporting. The other objection heard from self-styled capitalists on the right invites similar responses. Is the government picking winners and losers? And this was the criticism of MITI, right? They were picking winners and losers when it purchases an equity stake, no more so than when it hands out subsidies. Will companies innovate less if they think Uncle Sam stands ready with a bailout? That risk already exists in a grant-driven regime. So the argument then is that what we're doing is not any worse than what we're already doing. I'm not sure that's really comforting to me. Okay, yeah, what we're doing now is bad, and this is not any worse. I don't know about this. Some say equity stakes encourage reckless self risk taking, perhaps, but that's a feature, not a bug. I'm not sure I like that feature. America's real problem is too little corporate risk taking in hard industries, not too much. If government equity tips the scales towards bolder bets in semiconductors, it will have done something the market has conspicuously failed to do. The charge that a government equity stake in a publicly traded company is, as some critics have said it, a hallmark of socialism, is deeply unserious. Socialists didn't agitate for Washington to hold 10% of Intel stock with no voting rights. They wanted the state to own and operate the means of production outright. Well, this is, like I say, a foot in the door. You know, of course, this could develop to 50% later, eventually. A non-voting equity stake that recycles taxpayer risk into taxpayer return is not collectivization. It's closer to what any hard-nosed investor would demand if asked to pony up billions. Yes, okay, private sector investors obviously are going to demand this kind of a thing, but we're not talking about private sector investors. We're talking about government. And the reason we don't like government doing this is because what? Government controls lethal force. This is the thing that this is why government is always viewed with suspicion because it controls lethal force. And when push comes to shove, as it not now, obviously. I mean, President Trump is not going to send the National Guard into Intel now, but I'm talking about looking out 50 years. Okay, looking out 50 years, you could have a situation where the government owns 51% of Intel, especially if we get some Bernie Sanders type people. I mean, he's too old to go be president, but then, or AOC. Hey, listen, if AOC becomes president, she's going to say, hey, Trump had a good idea. Let's do even better. Let's go to 50% or 51%. I don't know. I think we're going to regret this. I just think we're going to regret this. Yeah, I think we're going to regret this. All right. The guy says my opinion is deeply unserious. He says, okay. All right, I've been put in my place. Ah, hmm. All right, let's see here. Well, all right, let's let that lie for a while. Okay. Let's see what else is on the Breitbart. But all shall be forgiven if you just bring down the Chinese Communist Party. That is the most important thing that President Trump needs to focus on. Let's see here. Oh yeah, Trump admin to phase out COVID vax. Well, excellent. Okay. My wife and I are still never vaxxed, never boosted, but anyway, some people, it's concerns some people, so good. Let's get rid of it. Marlow figured out who quarterbacked anti-Trump lawfare within the DOJ. And President Trump says there was a purge going on in South Korea. Well, yeah, I mean, purges are not necessarily bad, right? There's obviously a purge going on in America as well, and they're purging all the deep staters and all the never Trumpers and people like that, the people who are trying to destroy the country. California high-speed rail may connect Bakersfield and Merced by 2032. What did I want to say that the California high-speed rail has gone through 7 deaths and resurrections? I'm sorry, I don't mean to blaspheme, but California high-speed rail, I think, wow, well, we've been hearing about this ever since I don't know, 1980s, I think. I don't know. It seems like forever, maybe more recent, but seems like forever. Okay, let's see here. Kinzinger is a Republican who voted in favor of Trump's uh, impeachment. Occupying every city over so-called crime is how dictators come to power. Well, yeah, that's true. Except, they say, well, yeah, you know, dictators also eat scrambled eggs in the morning. Does that mean that if President Trump eats scrambled eggs, then he's also a dictator? These people, they always tried somehow to smear President Trump one way or another. Kasich says crime in cities is not a manufactured crisis. There are people at risk. Yeah, okay, they're good. Kasich is a guy from Ohio, right? He was member of Congress for a while. Yeah, okay, John Kasich, former governor. All right. I have such a different take than what we've just heard that talk about a manufactured crisis. Have you been to Chicago? Have you been in Baltimore? My daughter went to a school in Chicago. I remember the day she graduated. There were shootings and killings right outside of her building. In Baltimore, I have friends that go down to Johns Hopkins to get treated for medical conditions. I mean, they are nervous about ever going there. There are parts of Baltimore that he tells me he wouldn't go into. And this is not some right wing person. This is somebody who wants to be able to go into some of our great cities and be able to be safe. And I think that is a good point. And the reason that anti-Trumpers such as Kinzinger and he's a rhino. He's an extreme rhino, and Democrats are upset is because President Trump has found an election issue that is going to benefit him in the next election, in the midterm elections, because now he's serving the people that the Democrats are supposed to be serving but never did, and he's showing them up. And I think they are concerned that President Trump is going to increase the Republicans' hold on the House next year and also increase the number of seats in the Senate. California intentionally raising gas prices on its citizens to push electric vehicles. Yes, that's maybe true. And Trump tariffs are here forever, and Democrats will not be able to run against them. Probably, yes. Okay. Okay. And Trump signs order for to impose federal penalty for desecrating the U.S. flag. I understand. I understand. Okay, I understand. But uh, there is a free speech issue, isn't there? I understand, the patriotic aspect of it, but the classical liberal saying that I may disagree with what you say, but I will fight to the death to protect your right to say it. And that's the idea of classical liberalism, not the current sort of communist liberalism, or that the Democrats call themselves, but I mean, I think this may also be something that will come back to bite us later on. Because if we stop people from, if we from expressing their dissatisfaction with the United States, and this has been an issue for a long time. Vietnam War, during the Vietnam War, this was an issue. A lot of U.S. flags were desecrated during the anti-war demonstrations, and the sort of the consensus in American society back then was that, okay, but we don't agree with this, but um, there's a greater issue here, an issue of free speech. And courts also upheld that view that desecrating the U.S. flag is a free speech issue. So I suspect that this order is not going to hold up in court. I think um, even the conservative Supreme Court, I think, is going to go against this. Okay. Yeah, the Cracker Barrel. Uh-huh. Uh, this guy, Chiomar Abrego Garcia, the most famous illegal alien there ever was. They caught him. They sent him to El Salvador. The Democrats managed to get him back. Now, he's being deported again. This time to Uganda. Um, okay. What else here? 140 arrested on the first day of London's multicultural Notting Hill Carnival. Hmm. Zelensky says we must push Russia to peace and send war back to Russian soil. Okay, well, he's trying to rally the troops. Germany charges American over allegedly offering U.S. military secrets to China. Uh, let's see what kind of an American this guy was. An American man who worked at a U.S. military facility in Germany. Okay, great. Martin D. All right. Martin D. Identified as Martin D. in line with German privacy rules. I guess we won't find out very much about him until he comes back. The man worked between 2017 and early 2023 for a civilian contractor of the U.S. Defense Department, worked at an unidentified U.S. military facility in Germany from at least 2020 onward. Okay. So he contacted Chinese authorities repeatedly in the summer of 2024 and offering to provide sensitive U.S. military information for Chinese intelligence. Hmm. Sometimes people do this because they think that the other side is going to welcome them with open arms, but um, China's going to think that, well, maybe this guy is a double agent. So they're going to be very careful. And Mayor of Chicago says if Trump tries to crack down on crime in Chicago, there's going to be an uprising. Uprising by Democrats, I suppose. And the crime doesn't affect the wealthy areas, all right, where the Democrat leaders live. Obviously, Johnson, I'm sure his neighborhood is safe. Yeah, I'm sure it is. But if you go to the south side of Chicago, um, there are places where it's quite dangerous. And we hear about the shootings every week. Every weekend, there are shootings there. And so Johnson wants to. I'm not sure how he figures that this is going to benefit the Democrats in the next election, saying, oh, no, we don't want Trump coming in to help us stop crime. No, no, we want to have the status quo where people are getting killed every weekend. We want that to continue. I'm not sure how that's going to work as an election issue. In Sharpton, Trump only threatening cities with black mayors, race dog whistling. And yeah, because the black mayors have been neglecting their constituents. All right. And Trump is targeting the places that have been neglected. Anyways, seems obvious to me, but let's see here. 1,000 arrested as Trump makes DC safe again. Oh, really? I have to go back there sometime to see. Israel offers to withdraw from Lebanon after momentous decision to disarm Hezbollah. Hmm. Let's take a look at this. This would be historic if it happens. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu extended an olive branch to Lebanon on Monday, reacting positively to a decision earlier this month by the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah. Okay, can the Lebanese government disarm Hezbollah? Until now, they haven't been able to because, quite frankly, Hezbollah was stronger than the central government. But I guess with Iran weakened, perhaps that's become possible now. The Iranian-backed group was decimated by Israel last fall after Hezbollah attacked Israel with missiles, rockets, and drones for months following the Hamas terror attack on Israel on October 7, 2023. Hezbollah was already supposed to be disarmed under previous United Nations Security Council resolutions, but the Lebanese armed forces and the United Nations interim force in Lebanon did nothing. Well, yeah, what were they supposed to do? They didn't have the means to disarm them. Let's see. In the wake of the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, last year, the Lebanese government was finally able to elect a president and began, under U.S. pressure, to move toward ending Hezbollah's armed presence. However, the process of disarmament appeared stalled, and Israel continued to launch attacks against Hezbollah when the terror group appeared to move weapons into position as allowed by the ceasefire. In a statement issued by the Prime Minister's office, Lebanon has said that it will not seek a formal peace and normalization agreement with Israel, but that could change. Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see how it develops. Okay. I mean, aims advance great national unity as practice shown in the establishment. Yeah, if the current regime in Iran falls and a sort of a more a new government comes in that reflects the will of the people more broadly, that would be a big change in the Middle East. He delivered a speech on Sunday demanding complete submission to his regime from the Iranian people. Okay, yeah, right. Describing national unity as an iron shield to defend against America and Israel. Okay. his comments in the context of the beginning of a holiday known as Government Week in Iran. According to the state-run propaganda site Press TV, Government Week marks the week leading up to the 1981 martyrdom anniversary of Iran's then President Mohammad Ali Rajai and Prime Minister Mohammad Javad Bouhanar. Other state outlets describe Khamenei's appearances as related to the anniversary of the death of Imam Reza, the eighth Imam of Shia Islam. More immediately, the comments followed weeks of debate, some of it spilling into the public among political heavyweights in Iran, many of whom began to demand the Ayatollah seek negotiations with the United States after airstrikes are believed to have destroyed three of Iran's most important nuclear development sites. Multiple reports throughout August have identified members of the prior moderate administration of former President Hassan Rouhani as making public statements and writing articles suggesting that some form of negotiation with America was necessary to preserve the regime, a stark contrast to Khamenei's own rejection of any contact with the administration of President Trump. President Pezeshkian, who campaigned as an alleged moderate, also toed the line this week, issuing repeated comments demanding unity from the Iranian people behind Khamenei's defiant rejection of any attempts to improve relations with Washington. In his remarks on Sunday, Khamenei insisted that normalizing ties to the United States was impossible because Washington sought to subjugate Iran. But I think, he can safely assume that, yes, America would not mind seeing a change in regime in Iran, would not mind that at all. But America's not alone. A lot of the Iranian people feel the same way. So we'll see how that works out. See whether this sort of a small sort of a fire, so small flame of change in Iran may grow and result in a new regime. We'll have to see if that happens or not. Okay. Yes. Texas, Abbott, no more tax-funded abortion travel. School districts ditch hard-to-repair electric buses for diesel buses. Yeah, the mechanics don't know how to fix them. All right, let's see. We have a couple minutes left. Let's see what else is on Newsmax. Feds fight to keep alligator Alcatraz open. The left is really fighting everywhere, but they're fighting a rearguard action. And if alligator Alcatraz is closed, then President Trump will open something somewhere else. Or let's see, Trump wants new Pentagon name, War Department. Of course, that's the old name, right? During the Second World War, that's what it was called. Trump aide Halligan criticism of Guard is unbelievable. All right. Sebastian Gorka, federal aid at risk over cashless bail. And Russia's just playing games. Well, Russia's, you can say they're playing games, but they're executing a strategy, which is to sort of talk and fight at the same time. And from their perspective, I think it looks like a pretty effective strategy. And it doesn't look like President Putin is going to agree to peace in the current context. By that I mean that President Trump is going to have to put the pressure on him, through more sanctions, more tariffs, or something like that, or perhaps sanctions on China for helping Russia. I still think that's the Achilles heel. That if President Trump says to China, "Hey, you got to stop buying Russian oil. You got to stop. Your banks have to stop dealing with Russia. And if you don't, we're going to cut your banks out of the dollar system." then I think 48 hours, the war will be over. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. Well, let's see what happens. And I think, the dollar system, the dollar really is America's most lethal weapon. And I feel that the President Trump is not using it quite as effectively as he could. He's doing a pretty good job in that respect, but quite not quite. Okay. And most important thing for President Trump, bring down the Chinese Communist Party. Bring it down. Bring it down. Bring it down. All right, gotta go. Tomorrow's Wednesday. And yeah, wait, no, it's tomorrow Wednesday? Yes, it is. Okay. Yes. I will we'll continue what we started. I think we still have some left on that, don't we? On that speech. Anyway, I will see you tomorrow with some sort of um, detailed reading of True Father's words. All right, God bless, Godspeed. May